Hello everybody and welcome once again to another live stream here on the Outdoors Station, the second one in our series where we appear to be pushing ourselves really hard at the moment trying to get the shows on board and live out to everybody. So welcome everybody that's here today and joining us this evening. I'm going to say hello to a few people in person, but I'm just also going to say hello to people that might be watching in the future or will be hopefully watching in the future. And do come and join us on our live streams. You can find out more on the Outdoor Station Facebook page, live Facebook page, and on the Outdoor Station website, and of course also on the Outdoor Station on YouTube. Anyway, so first of all, let me just say hi to Ian McDougall, who's joined us. Nice to see you, Ian. Thank you very much for joining in. Walk with Wallace, and Russell as well has joined us as well. Russell, of course, we interviewed on Monday night and had a good chat with him about his recent experiences doing the PCT. And now we are obviously speaking to Eli Bishop tonight. who is a mental health advocate. She's a mountain leader, an outdoor instructor, and an Ordnance survey champion. So she's got a lot of badges to carry at the same time. And then on Friday, we're going to be doing an introduction to food dehydrators for people who have considered them and wondered what they're involved in using them, what they're like, what they physically look like, sound like, some of the things you can do with that. And we've also got some examples and demonstrations to give you an idea of the food. Now, in the chat room, we have the lovely Rose. Once again, give the world a wave, darling. There's and she hasn't pressed go on the microphone, so that was probably silent. Give it another go. Press the button. There you go.
Hi. Try again. I'll get there in the end.
Technology, it's a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. But anyway, Rose is looking after the chat room and welcoming people in, and she'll be giving us some comments from what's going on generally in there. But this is going to be an interesting conversation, really, and obviously you know from the subject matter and the title so far, we'll be covering various aspects of mental health and coping with isolation and this miserable situation we're going through at the moment with COVID, of course. So what I suggest, a thing that seems to have popped up to be popular on other streams, is that if you have a specific question, if you could put a capital Q at the beginning of your question, as it were, so it's easier and quicker to spot, and then we'll bring the questions in the last 10 minutes for a Q&A with Ellie, of course. So over to Ellie, who is, of course, my special guest for this evening. Good evening, Eli Bishop. Lovely to hear from you again, Ellie. Fantastic to see you fit and well. How are you coping with this isolation yourself?
Yeah, roller coaster, I think, is the best way of describing it. So good days, bad days. But yeah, we're in our third week now, and it's starting to really hit home. It's
certainly starting to get a bit boring now, isn't it? Really?
Yes. Yeah. It's always the way, isn't it? When you're at work full time, all you want to do is think, oh God, if I had time to be at home. And now that I'm really not interested in painting the bathroom. I don't want to. I just want to get out there and be doing stuff. So it's tough. It's really hard. So.
Well, indeed, the obviously the sort of three areas that we were looking at talking about in this particular stream was with the three sections really, so the isolation and coping with anxiety. One thing I was going to say actually to the people that are watching this that in the chat room, this mental stress, shall we say, that the COVID is causing us, it means different things to different people. Some people will be coping with it quite happily, and other people will be getting quite concerned about it. So if you're putting any comments in the chat room, do have a think about being a bit sensitive for the people that might be taking this a little bit more seriously, as it were, or feeling a little more punished by it. But we're going to look at the three areas. So I'm going to hand over to you, Ellie, and I will start with the isolation anxiety.
Okay, wow. Anxiety is a really interesting one. I think it affects everybody in very different ways. I mean, me personally, I had no idea that I had it until about 2014 when I had a huge breakdown. And I was actually then diagnosed with anxiety and depression as well at the same time. And for me, I mean, this graphic just sums it up perfectly. You just think, and then you think some more, and then you overthink, and you fill in all the gaps as well. So if anybody messages you or anything is done or said, your imagination just goes insane and it fills all the gaps with rubbish, basically. So at the moment, with everything that's going on, and everybody's in this strange place because we've never been in this situation before, so we've got nothing to compare it to. So those people who have got anxiety, it's like you're being bombarded with just stuff, and then you're making stuff up on top of it. So it's tough, it's hard, and a lot of people, and they're saying now that the fallout from this is actually going to be the numbers of people who have experienced or go on to continue experiencing mental health issues. So it's really vital that it's something that is addressed by the government, and they're doing the best that they can, and not everybody will agree with what they're doing, but they are in a situation that they've never been in, so how can you predict what's going to happen? So it's hard, but I mean, anxiety for me is very much about how I'm feeling that particular day. Yesterday I had a massive blip, and luckily someone came to my rescue, as it were. You never know what you're going to wake up to, what kind of thing. It's like a lottery. But it's interesting as well, anxiety and depression, because people don't really know what it looks like. They kind of think that if you are anxious, then you're going to be shy and introverted and quiet and keep yourself to yourself. People often assume that if you have depression, that you're going to be just looking miserable all the time and unresponsive. But actually, it's amazing how strong people are who have mental health issues, and how they are able to present to the world a false image. I've talked before about how it's almost like you're putting on a costume. I mean, this picture that we're looking at here is quite a poignant one, and Bob was very sweet and said, did I want to include it? Because this picture here was actually taken the day after I considered and made all the preparations to end my own life. I was very fortunate that night that somebody, a good friend who also has mental health issues, recognized the signs from me, and they kept me going through the night. I hadn't slept at all either that night, because he insisted on ringing me every hour to check that I was okay. So most people looking at this image will go, oh my God, isn't it great? They're happy. What a fabulous family. She looks like she's having an awesome time. So I think you need to remember, especially in the situation that we're in at the moment, when you're out and about and social distancing, of course, that person that you may be interacting with, that person in the supermarket, they might be dealing with something that you just don't understand. So it's really important to try and think about how different people are dealing with this in a different way, and that we all go out every day. We get up and we put on a costume. I did a talk once dressed as a penguin, because the whole idea was the fact that we get up and we put on a mask, and that's what we present to the world. But actually behind that mask is the real person. So it's really important that we look after each other, especially at this time. This image here, this is another time I had another sort of mini breakdown, I'll call it, not a big one, back in July, and I was leading a mental health panel at Carfest, the big sort of music festival, and I was talking to 4 other people, and I was asking them about their mental health and how getting outside helps them. So I was there, I was on stage in front of hundreds of people, having to talk about this 2-3 times a day for 3 days in a row. And on the final day, it was actually this talk here, I actually kind of came out, as it were, to the audience, and I said, look, guys, just so you know, I'm in a really, really bad place right now. But they wouldn't have known, because I was up on the stage being chipper and being all happy. So it's never what you think. And behind that mask, you talk about isolation, Bob. And actually that's a really good word, because when you are in that moment, that time, you do feel completely isolated. So if you already have mental health issues at this time in particular, you're already feeling isolated because that's how your brain is thinking. Then add to that the fact that you may be like me, completely isolated, because I'm on my own. My kids are with me every other week. So this week they've been with their dad. All fits in with government guidelines, by the way. So I have had a week where I have been completely alone, and it's not much fun, to be honest. So it has really made me look and think about how we can develop strategies to help ourselves to manage that at this time, and ways in which I can start putting content out there that people might be able to connect to and use. Sort of almost, if I can give some of my strategies up for people to see, then maybe they can build up their own little toolbox of things that they can use. Some of them might not be useful to them, but out of, let's say, I'm doing a thing at the moment about strategies. I know we've moved on to the next section now, but it's, I'm doing a thing called Mind Body Life, which is lots of different strategies for how you can deal with mental health on a daily basis. A lot of them are connected with the outdoors, because that is, at the end of the day, my passion. When I had my breakdown, it was the outdoors that saved me. And I know that sounds very melodramatic, and my mother would probably be rolling her eyes at the moment. She always said that I would either be on stage or a barrister, but there we go. So getting outside is essential, and it is the thing that I reached for when I had my breakdown, and it's the reason why I'm here doing this now, because I set up my blog To Outdoors and Beyond, which is pretty much now migrated 100% onto Instagram. So I think I'd probably call myself an Instagram blogger rather than anything else, because that's a way that I can connect with people.
So if I can just sort of break in there, there's a couple of things that sort of immediately come to mind. Is for people watching this that are perhaps feeling a bit low but don't want to give it a title, or for people that we might meet or pass or know vaguely, as it were. Familiar strangers is a great term, as the one I like to use.
Yeah. Familiar
strangers. How do you recognise in other people that they might be suffering, as let alone your own personal feelings?
I think if it's people that you have had an interaction with before, then you have a benchmark on which to sort of measure where they could be. So it's difficult because, like I said, people are really good. I mean, one of the graphics before said about that someone says, "How are you?" and you go, "I'm fine. I'm great. Yeah, lovely to see you. Take care." But sometimes you have to ask twice, and sometimes you have to try and connect with that person. So it could be that you saw them when you were doing your essential shopping, of course, and they just seemed a little bit, I don't know, just a little bit off, a little bit odd. But being in that environment isn't somewhere that you can talk to them. So you can connect in another way. You could get home, you can contact them, give them a ring. I've certainly realised through this that actually speaking to people is far more important than messaging. To the point that actually a friend of mine came round last night, and I said to them, right, that's it. I'm not doing WhatsApp anymore. If we're going to have a conversation, we do it on the telephone. So I think if you see people who just try and connect with them in some way. But there are other people who you don't know that you can easily see are really suffering. I mean, an incident the other day was my daughter and I were in the supermarket, and there was a woman there. She had a scarf, grey pashmina, wrapped around her face, and she was, touching it and what have you, which obviously we all know is not the right thing to do. But she looked genuinely terrified. She really did. And my daughter and I were waiting to look in one of the cabinets that she was looking in. So we were 2 meters away, but obviously her perception of 2 meters and our perception of 2 meters was very different. And she just went into complete panic mode and started absolutely laying into my daughter. Now I, older and wiser, clearly, I just moved away. And I said, it's okay, it's fine. And I backed off and I actually went and stood next to, 2 meters away, you know what I mean, from a member of staff in the supermarket. But my daughter was like a rabbit in headlights. And this woman just kept on and on and on at her. And I could see that she was not doing it out of malice. She was doing it out of fear. And rather than being angry with her, I just felt sorry for her. And I called Lily over, and then I did manage to speak to the woman and just said, look, I understand that you're very frightened and I'm very sorry that you felt that we were in your space. We're going to wait. You finish your shopping and, just take care. Because it's obvious sometimes you can see, especially at the moment, that there are people out there. And it doesn't matter what our opinions are, whether we believe you should be wearing something around your face or not, or whether you should be wearing gloves or not. If that person feels better for doing that and they feel more protected and more safe, then that's okay, isn't it, really? And I think we need to respect people and their decisions and just be kind.
So when it comes to a situation like that, then, if you knew this person better than obviously a familiar stranger in the supermarket, what advice, what strategy would you be giving to them about how to cope with this anxiety and this build-up of pressure that are obviously, everybody's feeling. It's not just that woman in the supermarket. I've witnessed it here as well. There are people that just go that extra mile and take on far more. Or stress is the only word I can think of, but far more internal pressure, and they start to get like a kettle that needs to explode to burst out the pressure.
Absolutely. Strategies that I use and that I recommend is something really simple as a breathing technique. We always think, if some like hippie says, oh, just breathe, darling, just breathe. And you're like, yeah, I do that all the time. I don't need a lesson. But actually, conscious breathing, taking a really deep breath in, holding it, and then taking a slightly longer breath out. It just gives breathing time. Excellent, perfect. I remember when I was teaching, I did a similar thing, and I still do it when I instruct, is I ask a question of my group and I say, right, I'm going to give you 15 seconds and I want you just to think about the question, take a deep breath, and then think about the answer and tell me. And it's the same thing. Sometimes when you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, just something as simple as breathing in, holding, and breathing out can give you and your body and your mind a chance to just settle slightly. And it's all a form of mindfulness. And mindfulness obviously is one of the words of the moment. But I think being aware of how you're feeling and how others are feeling is really important. There are things like making sure that you're getting good sleep, that you're eating well. I've had a couple of things lately where I've joked about having gin and tonic, basically. But I realised a couple of nights ago that I wasn't sleeping and that my anxiety was getting worse. So I've now stopped. And I'm making sure that I'm eating better. I'm making sure that I'm doing a little bit more exercise where I'm really raising the heart rate. And also getting outside. The government has said that we are able to get outside for one form of exercise a day, be it a walk, a cycle ride, or a run, from sort of 30 minutes to an hour. And I think that is absolutely vital. It also gives you an opportunity to connect. I talked about that before, connecting with nature, connecting with other people. For me this week, because I've been on my own, going out for that walk each day from my front door and just seeing people and being able just to smile and say hello has been a salvation for me, because I've not had any other connection with people. But also just being out there. I mean, just 15 minutes outside is scientifically proven to really help mental health. So it's kind of a no-brainer, really. So really, I think it's really important that people use that time to get outside every day, and connect with themselves and with others. I think it's really important. I mean, it's also, I wrote an article today talking about this. You've got people like my mum, for instance, who is having to stay home because she is over 70 and she's in a very vulnerable position. But she makes sure that she goes out and sits in the garden. And one day she could just go and lie out on the lounger and just watch the clouds as they go by. Or she can just see how many birds she can hear singing. So she's making sure that she's still getting outside and having that vitamin D and those serotonin levels raised, because it's really important. People who live in cities, I think a lot of us are really lucky because we're able, I'm sat here and I can look out my window and I can see the edge of the Forest of Dean. I know that the River Wye is just behind me, like 5 minutes away. But a lot of people don't have that. So for them to be able to access green spaces and the outdoors is really important. I said to someone the other day that you could almost look at it being a tourist in your own home. So if you live in a city or a town, perhaps you can go out and do things like go and see how many blue plaques there are on the walls. I used to be a designer, so for me sometimes I'll do silly things like I'll go around and see how many different coloured front doors I can find and take photographs of them. There's lots of different things you can do. Now the great thing is that you can use any of the like online digital map tracking programs. Obviously I would big up the OS Ordnance Survey one, but there are loads that you can get. And you could actually go out, you can do it on your own or with your kids and see if you can draw pictures with your route. A friend of mine actually went out for a walk and she drew the coronavirus sort of cell, as it were. So the circles with all the little lines. It took her ages to work out how to do it. But it meant that when she went outside, she had a purpose. There was a meaning to what she was doing. She felt engaged and as if she was actually doing something. And at the end of it, she'd achieved something that she could visualize and see. And it's really good for kids. You can say, right, let's go out. I'm going to do some of this with my kids this weekend. Let's go out and see what pictures we can draw on the local streets. So it's trying to be creative with the time that you have and making it really count. So that's really important.
Well, certainly there's been a few questions coming in, and I just want to remind people that are watching this, if they do have any specific questions, if they could put a capital Q at the beginning of their comment, just so that I can see that and isolate it. And I'll bring that towards in front of Ellie a bit later on. Now, there's a whole variety here, and you're getting into the creative area now. And I've noticed a lot of people actually, once they've stopped interacting with the social media and stopped, well, here we are doing social media, but interacting with that sort of being plugged in so much to the internet, their creativity actually starts to sprout, and they start doing things that they either hadn't thought about before or just thought about dabbling with. And that's one area that I notice, certainly online, that there have been various shops now starting to expand or get very busy, so the courier drivers tell me, on the creative front.
Yeah. Well, my daughter, I taught her to knit the other day, which was a feat in itself because I can't actually knit. But I managed to teach her enough. And so she's now got a book and she is knitting blankets for the Cats Protection League. So she's finding something that is giving her purpose. And also it means that at the age of 16, she's not spending all her time either glued to a television or her screen and the delights of scrolling through internet and all the different social media channels. I've decided that I'm going to go back to my youth, as it were, and I'm going to make friendship bracelets. So anybody who is kind of my age, if you remember like friendship bracelets that were all woven, so I've decided I'm going to start making those, and then I'm going to design a little handmade note, and I'm going to post them to all my friends. So I'm creating something. I'm spending time doing something different. The weather's amazing, so I'm going to sit out in the garden and do it. And also I'm gifting something to someone else that's going to make them smile. So there are lots of things out there. I have started doing a lot more gardening. I'm looking at planting seeds. And there's just so much inspiration out there for things that are happening. I mean, two places that have got lots of ideas of things that you can do at home are the Ordnance survey. So if you go to getoutside.uk, they've got a hub there which has got loads of stuff, and it's not all just about running up and down your stairs, which everyone seems to be doing at the moment, including me tomorrow. I don't know why I've got roped into that. But there's lots of other things in there about how you can be creative with your time and make it much more meaningful each day. And also the Ramblers as well. They've got a campaign called Roam Sweet Home. And it's the same thing. It's about how you can do little things each day that give you that little bit of inspiration and a little bit of focus, which a lot of us have lost at the moment. So they're really good to do. But other things for me, sort of for staying positive, the first few days was really kind of exciting. And it was like, oh, all this time. And I was sleeping late and thinking, oh my God, I can stay up late because I don't have to get up in the morning. And soon I started to realize that my mental health was just dropping completely, just off the scale. So for me now, it's really important that I have a routine. I make sure that I get up at the same time every day. I've started now, well, I say now, literally this morning, I've just started doing my sort of, I used to do HIIT little routines for about 20 minutes, so high intensity training, circuit training every day, back in the days when I was fit. So I started doing that again, which is really good. And so I've got a routine now set for the day.
Would you say a routine is the answer to most of the overcoming most of the problems? Getting to a routine and sticking with it, or at least having a routine to focus on.
Yeah, I was going to say having a routine to focus on, I think, is really important, because that's the big thing that's been taken out of our lives. For those of us who worked, we've just completely lost that. So I think that is incredibly important. And it's made a real difference to me. Other things as well, though, is I restrict the amount of news that I watch. So I make sure that I don't engage in any news at all until the evening. So I wait until about 9 o'clock in the evening when the government, I know, have done their daily sort of update. And then I'll access quality news channels. I usually go to the Guardian or the Independent. But there are others out there, obviously. But I think making a good choice about where you source your information from can help with your mental health as well, because it's been sensationalized in a lot of media. So I'm very particular about how much I look at and how long I look at it. So that's been really important. Social media as well, I completely restricted that. I had about 5 or 6 days off completely the other week, and it was absolutely blissful. Unfortunately, the nature of my business is I have to be on social media, but the way that I approach it now is very different. I'm much more organised with what it is I'm going to put on. I go on, I do it, I leave, because there's a lot of things happening on social media that aren't helping me, and I can imagine aren't helping other people either. My main platform is Instagram, and it's great. And there are a lot of people out there doing some really, really good things. But it does seem a bit like everyone is on Instagram going, well, I'm doing self-isolation much better than you because I'm doing this today. And you're kind of there in your smelly pajamas with a cup of coffee where the milk's kind of got the film on the top, and you're just there thinking, really, oh, it's horrible. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, and it doesn't help because we're human. We compare ourselves to other people, and that's normal. So the easiest thing to do to stop doing it is stop looking at it. So I'm on there a lot less, and I take it with a big pinch of salt. Another thing about staying positive is I've really accepted the fact that my life goes slower now.
And that does.
And
I
then
mean,
it's so.
I've seen this mentioned a few times actually by, I have to say, people of our kind of generation. That do you remember when
27?
Yes, with a few more years' experience. Yeah, what's that squared symbol in the corner? Before Sunday trading happening, I've seen the comments so many times now. I was but a slip of a lad, and I'm sure you were a twinkle in your mother's eye. But
Absolutely.
those days when you couldn't go to the shops on Sunday. In fact, it's a bit like if you go to France, if you've ever been to France or certain European countries, there are no shops open on a Sunday. And initially it's like, what? I need a screw, or a plug-in or something. And it's like, no, it's not important. It's actually more important to spend time with the family and spend time getting out and also refocusing your mind. Because I mean, I'm going through that at the moment. Obviously, I'm invested a lot of time and effort into what I've got here. And I'm trying to push heavily on social media as much as I can. So I'm sort of sucked into it. But at the same time, through that door, I've got a fantastic, view and garden, and I'm not getting out to it. I'm sort of beating myself up continually that as soon as I'm out there, I feel I should be doing something in here. And when I'm in here, I feel I should be out there. It's a nightmare,
It is. It's double-edged sword completely. And I've always said that, and I know that we've talked about it before, that it's thing of social media is it's something that we have to do because at the end of the day it is the biggest marketing platform that's going, but it is really very detrimental to mental health. I mean, it's interesting that in the last year or so that gaming addiction has become a mental health category. I don't think it's going to be long, and I'd imagine it will probably be within the next year that social media addiction is going to become a mental health category as well, because it's just consuming people. So I think being really strong and stepping away from that, going slow, doing things like this, just going and sitting outside, reading magazines. I used to love magazines, and I never get them. So there's different things that we can do that help us to stay positive. Taking time. I mean, this is my son and I just going and sitting out in the forest. As I said, I'm very lucky where I live. I can access this from the door. And we just sat. And the plan was to sit there for 10, 15 minutes. I think we were there for half an hour at least, just relaxing. So going slow and allowing yourself time is really important, and really engaging in the outdoor time, both in your garden or during your daily exercise. I even bought a camera rather than take my phone. So I no longer take my telephone with me when I go for a walk. I take a camera. So all I can do is take photos. And I found, again, talking about the creativity, I found my creative side again. I touched on the fact I used to be a designer. And, I was a designer for many years. I went to the Royal College of Art, and photography was one of the main ways that I sort of generated my design work. So having a camera, look, it's my baby here. I love my camera.
Oh, nice.
So yeah. So that's what I take with me now, and it has meant that my walk, my time is much more focused on actually engaging in the outdoors, and then connecting with people. I've spoken a lot about this, and clearly, my emphasis is very much about getting outside for mental health, but I have realized and discovered that connecting is incredibly important. And also at this time, I think if people can telephone people and FaceTime or Skype or WhatsApp video rather than messaging, it's just so much better. So much so that, a lot of my friends, I'll or they will send me a message saying, hey, how you doing? And I'll just pick up the phone and I'll call them back and go, I'm doing okay, how are you? And you can then go, oh, I'm all right. And I'm like, it's okay, we're only gonna be a couple of minutes, and but just I'd like to hear your voice, because it just makes you smile, I think, much more when you're actually speaking to people, and smiling's nice. So yeah. And I think another thing is try and do something just a bit different, a bit silly every day. I think it's quite easy when I've got the kids here, because if I do something stupid like come downstairs dressed as a penguin, then I know that they'll be completely embarrassed, which I'll find even more funny.
You're going out again, Mum, like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So just doing silly stuff. I mean, I put a video up. Actually, you had it as the front header for the advertising for this evening, and it was all about a journey that I went on, a really epic adventure in my back garden. And it went from the rug that I'd been lying on for 45 minutes watching the clouds, all the way over to the hammock, because it was getting a bit cooler. So I thought if I snuggled up in the hammock, it'd be better. And I did a video of it, about my journey and the planning for my journey and the map and the fact that I had hydration. And the actual journey took 28 seconds. But I put it on Strava, so it's real. But yeah, and my son said to me the other day, he said, Mum, that video that you did, and it went up One Ramblers, and I was like, yeah. And he went, that was a bit cringy, wasn't it? And I was just like, yes, excellent result, So if it makes my kids embarrassed, then it makes me incredibly happy, because as far as I'm concerned, that is my primary role in life, is to embarrass my children. So doing something silly, I think, is really good. And actually to the point that I'm determined that one day I'm going to go on a walk in my penguin suit, just to cheer up the residents of Ross-on-Wye. So...
Well, make sure you take your camera on that one, definitely.
I will, don't worry.
Right, well, I just want to say to people, as I say, if anybody's got any specific questions, if they could put them in the chat room with the capital Q. If you want to hear more about Ellie, I spoke to her in July last year regarding exactly the same topic, really, but it may be something worth referring to, which is obviously on the podcast. And so I'm just going to pull up a few questions here, if I may, Ellie. Let me just start the ball rolling. Second. Here we go. So the Flying Sprout, great name. I think sometimes I say I'm fine, but probably expect others to recognise that I'm not, but they don't. Is this something that's common, and how is best to approach or deal with that or those expectations?
I think it's incredibly common. I think when you have any form of anxiety, be it mild or more severe, it is normal to think that other people should be more interested in us than they actually are, which sounds quite harsh. But I remember once I went to a counsellor and I was trying to explain to him how I felt. And he looked at me and he just said, my darling, he said, what makes you think you're that important? And I just, at that point, I wasn't ready for that. And I just got up and walked out and said, he's not for me. But actually, I think it's really important to remember that everybody is dealing with something that we don't know about. And it could be that there are a number of reasons why they're not recognizing it. One, they just don't understand it and they don't get it. They're just not that intuitive, and that's fine. Another reason is actually they're dealing with something themselves that means that they don't feel that they're able to connect to you in that way. And another is fear. A lot of people are really frightened of asking that question, how are you? Because they don't think that they can deal with the answer. And often those of us who've got mental health as well, when we're asked how you are, we'll go, I'm fine, because actually we're not sure that we're ready to be able to impart that information. So it is really common. I think the best way to deal with it is if there is somebody that you can talk to more candidly, more openly, then often talking to them, I think, is really important. But also, I don't know, sometimes maybe you just need to be a little bit more upfront and actually say, I'm having a really bad time. Can I talk to you about it? And then you can kind of give them an out, and you can say, feel free to say no, it's okay, but it's just, we get on well and I don't need you to say anything, but if you could just listen while I natter, because often that's all you need is someone to just listen. You don't need them to tell you what to do. And if you say to them, I don't need you to solve this, but if you can just listen to my mad rantings for a minute, I'd really appreciate it. Then they might come back and be like, oh, okay, I can listen. I can do that. That's
good. Thank you. The next one is from Russ Hepton, who I interviewed on Monday, actually, and this is quite interesting from referring back to that conversation. Since getting back from the PCT, I'm going into isolation. It's been tough, and I've started smoking and drinking more than I should. What advice would you give to those struggling with addictions now? And I should imagine there's many people that are going into that sort of rabbit hole at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I spoke earlier about the fact that I'd started drinking a lot more, considering I used to be teetotal. It was interesting. It's natural, it's normal. I think everybody's going through it. There's lots of those stupid memes going around on Facebook about Barbie being the size of a house at the end of isolation. We're all going to be very different people, but I think it's important to give yourself a bit of a break, and actually accept that this isn't permanent and it's not going to go on forever. And I think perhaps with the smoking and drinking, certainly with the drinking, I've decided that I'm not going to give it up, God forbid, but I'm going to make sure that I only drink socially, which obviously at the moment is a real challenge because I'm completely on my own. But if I want to have a drink, I figure then I've got to actually FaceTime someone and say to them, do you want to have a chat? Why don't we pour a glass of wine or have a gin and tonic? So then I'm actually sat talking to someone, FaceTiming them. We're each having a drink. And at the end of that, I feel as if I've connected with somebody, as if I've had a good old natter. I've had a drink. And actually that one drink is enough and it was fine. So I think if there's ways that you can sort of minimize it without saying to yourself, I'm not going to do it. There's no point at this point saying, I'm going to give something up, because none of us are going to do that. And I think we need to accept that. So maybe just try and do it socially in some way. But other than that, I'm not an expert on addiction at all. So
I think it's probably a habit thing, isn't it? Really, you sort of start getting into one habit and it starts feeling comfortable.
Yeah, it does.
Ian McDougall. Often I think anxiety is caused by assuming we know what others are thinking or feeling rather than grasping the nettle and asking them. Actually, it's the opposite question to the flying sprout, isn't it? Any techniques for opening up and asking the important questions? What are the important questions that would stimulate the conversation, that would genuinely get an answer from somebody that tells you exactly how they are feeling, as opposed to being, I'm okay?
Oh, I did one the other day. A friend of mine was feeling really bad, and they were like, I can't explain it. And I said, okay. I said, if you're a colour, what colour would you be? And she came up with a colour, and I just questioned her about the colour. I said, well, why that colour? What is it about that colour? So she was able to describe, because she chose red. And so she started talking about, well, I feel very angry. I feel as if everything's very contained. So she started to describe the colour, which actually, kind of unbeknown to her, was her explaining to me how she was feeling. But yeah, you saw me laugh when I read that, because anxiety really is assuming we know what others are thinking. It's filling in the gaps. And yeah, absolutely. And it is hard also to ask people sometimes what they're thinking, because if you have anxiety and you know that someone else is struggling, then I don't know about you, Ian, but I would automatically think, well, it's me. They've got a problem with me. That's why. And then, so I'm not going to ask them, because I don't want to know what I've done to upset them. So it's kind of this vicious circle. But I think opening up a dialogue, any kind of dialogue with somebody, is just really important. And sometimes actually, I think just saying, you seem a bit off. If you want to talk, let's go for a walk. I'm not going to say anything. You can just talk. Because again, a lot of people are quite sort of nervous about either giving advice or receiving advice, but just having an ear and someone to listen is really good.
Okay, and the final question actually is one for me, which is an interesting turn up for the books. Again from Russell, for Bob. Have there been times in your life where you struggled with your mental health, and how did you overcome this? Yes, in fact, there has been a time, and specifically about 20 years ago, just after the millennium. I previously had a business partner, and unfortunately the business partner took the rug from underneath me, and financially and emotionally, as well as all the sort of effort you put into a business, I was at my lowest ebb. And as it happened, backpacking and hiking saved me, because I got more and more interested in this new wave phenomena that was floating around, the lightweight backpacking. And I asked Rose to teach me how to use a sewing machine, which she did do. And then after that, I was a man possessed. I was making bags and tarps and all sorts of interesting things, which eventually led into the business of Backpacking Light at the time, about 15 years ago. So there was a good sort of 3 to 6 months period where, as Ellie would describe, you just sort of feel flat and you've got no energy, and you sort of have a plastic face that says, hey, everything's great, and you meet somebody and you're on top of the world, but actual fact, underneath it all, you're not feeling particularly good. So yeah, I've been there, and I'm glad to say I've come out of it. And also, I've noticed a few people I've interviewed over the years, quite a few people also have experienced similar things as well when we've actually gone onto the subject. So such has been my rich and colourful past. Anyway, that has been, I think, all the main questions that have come through. There's lots of little comments that have come through from various people, which I want to thank for joining us on this particular occasion. Of course, we do have a further stream coming on, where are we? Let's talk about Ellie's first of all. If you want to contact Ellie and actually spend time on her social media, as she was just been talking about. She won't be there, but you can spend time on it. Obviously, you've got Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, which is a way to keep in contact. And I noticed that you might be getting a call already, because Russell has said he's thinking of having a glass of wine with you very soon. So it might actually be after this stream, which is great.
Excellent.
Now, as people may be watching this, obviously the Outdoor Station, we've been running for 15 years, and we are officially the longest running outdoors podcast in the world. And we are dedicated to the hiker, backpacker, adventurer and self-powered traveller. And these videos are an extension now of the type of things that we're doing, spreading the word and using technology, certainly with this current isolation, to try and cheer people up and give them something to think about. And if you want to look at the history, there's plenty of podcasts there to choose from, more than 500. And currently, I've recently started a Ko-fi and a Patreon account as well. So if somebody likes this and just wants to buy me a coffee, they can do so at Ko-fi. If they want to be a bit more of a serious contributor and supporter, they could go to Patreon, and the details are there, which is great. So where can you find the podcasts? Well, you can find them flipping well everywhere. It's taken me years to put them all over the place, and there they are. Even shouted at Alexa, and you'll get hopefully some reply, but also the other places that are available around the world as well. Now, the next stream on Friday is about food dehydrators. As I said at the very beginning, it's an introduction to dehydrators. And what I would like people to do, if that's at all possible, they feel capable, if they've got time on their hands, they're not got anything else to do, and they've got a dehydrator, and they would like to share their experience, and perhaps they could take a video. Do a video of their experience with the dehydrators, what they think, the benefits it's been to them on the outdoors. And then if you follow the instructions on the Outdoor Station website, how to submit a 30-second video review, then you can drop me a video which I will then put together and drop into the show on Friday. But it's just going to be a basic show and tell, if you like. But I think there's a lot of people that have got a lot of interest in working out and trying to find out if a dehydrator is for them. And certainly it's another form of food preservation in these interesting times, of course. And with spring coming on, there's nothing nicer than starting to dehydrate and save some of your favourite herbs for the future. So, Ellie, I just want to say thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. I do appreciate the content that you've said. I do hope that the people who are watching have enjoyed it too. I'll just have a look, see if there's any more comments that come through. Various comments basically saying thanks very much is the gist of it. So that's good of them to enjoy that. And of course, people watching this in the future, I hope that you get something from it as well. As I say, you can always come back to us at the Outdoor Station or over to Ellie on her various social media.
Cool.
Thanks very much, Ellie.
Take care.
Okay, until next time, folks, I'll see you on Friday. Bye for now.